Nobody in my house signed up to the US Federal Reserve. But this week, a handful of people in a room in Washington helped set the number on my mortgage. I never met them. I'll never meet them. And on a $600,000 loan, every 50 points they nudge is about $115 a fortnight out of my kitchen. So I'm going to do something with this video. I'm going to put it on trial. Because the biggest bill my family pays isn't power, isn't groceries, isn't the car. It's the mortgage, about $658 a week. Before we buy a single thing, someone move that number. I want to know who did it. And I'm going to give them a fair hearing, defense and all. Here is the charge. New Zealand has its own central bank. The Reserve Bank sets the official cash rate, and right now, that rate is 2.25%, decided in Wellington by Kiwis for Kiwi reasons. So why is the 2-year fixed rate? My bank just offered me 5.19. And why did it twitch the night after a meeting in Washington, a meeting where officially they changed nothing? That's the accusation, that the most important number in your life is being set, in part, in a room you've never seen, by people you will never meet. Exhibit A, the pipe. Take that 5.19 and strip out the bank's margin, about 170 basis points they add on top, for cost and profit. What's left underneath is the wholesale swap rate, around 3.5%, and that rate is not really ours, it's an import. It rides on the global price of money, and the global price of money has one anchor above all others, the United States. Fed rate, to US 2-year Treasury, to the global bond market, to our swap rate, to your bank's funding, to the number on your loan. 6 links, Washington at the top, your kitchen at the bottom, and here's the proof, the pipe is live. This month, the Fed met and held no change at all. And yet the US 2-year yield still jumped about 16 basis points in a single session, the biggest Fed day move since 2008. Officially, nothing happened. And the benchmark our swap desks watch reset overnight, while you were asleep. Exhibit B, follow the money into your bank. It doesn't just lend out the deposits from down the road. Roughly $1 in every 5 it lends is borrowed offshore, on global markets, mostly in US dollars, and more than half of that is short-term, repricing constantly at whatever the world is charging this week. So when America's cost of money climbs, the cost of funding your mortgage climbs with it, not the whole loan, the marginal slice. But the marginal slice is the one that sets the price at the edge. Exhibit C, the damage. Think back to 2021. You fixed it maybe 2.6% and you felt clever. But Kiwi fixes only last a year or two. That low rate wasn't a deal, it was a countdown timer. The Fed hiked 5.25% in 16 months, the fastest in 40 years. Our Reserve Bank moved almost in lockstep. And when your timer ran out, you rolled onto something like 7.5%, at the worst possible moment. Same house, same you, different rate room. On a $580,000 loan, that whole journey, 2.25%, up to 7.09, added about $774 a fortnight. $20,000 a year, an extra grocery shop, every single payday, for years. And in the first half of last year, over $200 billion of Kiwi mortgages came up to refix, suburb by suburb, the timer going off all at once. That's the charge. And that's the damage. Now, the defense, and I promised a fair hearing, so you need to hear this, because the defense makes good points. The Fed does not set our official cash rate. It doesn't. New Zealand peaked earlier than America, started cutting earlier, and right now, our rate, 2.25, sits more than a full percent below the Fed's 3.5 to 3.75. Our short end is genuinely ours. And the Reserve Bank's own research finds that U.S. shocks explain about 56% of the long-run swing in one technical bond market spread. 56% of a spread, not 56% of your mortgage. The offshore funding is the marginal slice, not the bulk. Most of your loan is still funded by ordinary Kiwi deposits. And here is the defense's strongest card: rent. In New Zealand, interest rates barely move rents. Wages move rents. Migration moves rents. While rates stayed high right through last year, the national rent actually fell because net migration collapsed from 129,000 people a year to about 11,000. So the Fed does not set the number on your tenancy agreement, and anyone who tells you it does is selling you something. The defense rests, and it's right. This is influence and constraint, not command. But the prosecution gets a rebuttal, because just when the defense says a floating Kiwi dollar protects you, that shield transmits too. A hawkish Fed pulls money toward the US, the New Zealand dollar sags, lately around 57 US cents, and suddenly the imported half of the supermarket trolley and the petrol in the car costs more. And that imported inflation is one of the things that keeps our Reserve Bank holding rates higher than it otherwise would. Even the shock absorber passes the Fed through to you. And one more thing, for the record. About 90% of New Zealand's home loans are written by just 4 banks, and not one of them is headquartered here. They're Australian. They import the global funding cost on one side, and they pipe the reward, over $4 billion in dividends in a single year, straight back across the Tasman on the other. The same machine that prices your biggest bill is also the machine that pockets it. And when our own new Reserve Bank governor co-signed an international letter defending the US Fed's independence, our Foreign Minister, Winston Peters, told her, in public, to stay in her New Zealand lane. Even the people in charge can't agree on whose lane this is. So, the verdict. Who actually moved your rate? Wellington or Washington? The honest answer is both. Wellington holds the lever for the short end. But Washington sets the height of the tide the whole ocean sits on, and you don't get to vote on the tide. Guilty of influence, not control. And that is not an acquittal, that is the whole problem. It means you are a price taker, standing at the far end of a very long pipe, in a decision you never got a say in. The same machine that took the $774 can hand some back when the tide turns, which is exactly why it's worth knowing who actually controls the machine, and who's just along for the ride. So next time a man you've never met steps up to a podium in Washington and says the Fed is holding steady, check your refix date. Because steady for him might be a countdown for you. If you'd rather understand the machine than get blindsided by it, that's the whole job of this channel. So look and subscribe.